Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel. Today's panel is going to be focusing on horror production. And I'm joined by a really exciting group of creatives across a few different crafts in horror production. My name is Corey Stillman. I'm a publicist here at Impact 24 PR, as well as a journalist with bylines at IndieWire, Polygon, and Awards Radar. And I'm so excited to be speaking with everybody today. So please join me in welcoming to the virtual stage cinematographer on Alien Earth, Bella Gonzalez, costume designer on him, Dominique Dawson,
How you doing?
cinematographer on Black Phone 2, Per M. Ekberg.
Nice to see you all.
And then we have makeup department head on The Long Walk, Doug Morrow.
Hello, everyone.
So thank you again to all of you for joining us. Really excited to dive into this conversation. I'm really glad we have a nice diversity of crafts here, as well as a nice diversity of pretty iconic horror projects from a year that has been filled with several of them. And so this first question, I want to start kind of high level. It's a very broad question. I want to ask to each of you. If you could just talk to us, because we do have a few different crafts here, if you could each just maybe identify what you might describe as your favorite tool in your arsenal. Maybe you're a tool in your tool belt that you just kind of can't live without when it comes to your craft, especially as it relates to the projects we're talking about today. So, Doug, I'll start with you as the makeup department head.
Tools kind of a broad term, especially in my departments. But I think if we're talking about horror, I mean, one of the most important things, I guess, the tool that I have is my blood bag, basically, because um, even when you don't think the director's going to ask for blood, they do. Um, and all kinds of different blood and Joe blood and especially mouth blood. And in fact, my nickname here is Mouth Blood. I worked on a movie several years ago and the director kept calling for Mouth Blood. And I would always run in and I don't know, it just kind of stuck. So um, I don't know if that's exactly a tool, but for me it is.
I think tool as an ambiguous term is kind of the idea of this question, so that's a perfect response. And definitely
Okay.
excited to talk a little bit more about some blood and sweat as we move into more specifics later on. But Dominique, I want to go to you as a fellow designer.
Yeah, for me, it's really simple. Like, it's snips. I have these scissors that I wear around my neck, and there's just always something that is, if there's a seam or a thread or a piece of flesh that's hanging off that's just a little too much, I have those snips to take care of it. So, yeah.
Very cool. And of course, we have a pair of cinematographers here. So tools for you guys, I know is a little more of a technical term. I'm curious if we could start with you, Bella. You want to tell us a little bit about a tool in your tool belt you can't live without?
Mine's like a compound thing, which is a piece of equipment called a black arm, and then another piece of equipment right now that we use like a Ronin 2, but I think any stabilized remote head. But essentially, what the black arm does is it attaches to the dolly, and then you put a stabilized head on it, and then you can kind of like free play jazz with how you're moving the camera. So it's stabilized, you don't need dance floor, you're not on track. You could still do compound moves. And for me, it's the biggest tool in my arsenal because it allows me to kind of craft shots the way they need to be, limitless of, exactly like staying on track or bored or whatever that might be. So just opening myself up to actually tell the story in the best way is that tool is the best thing for it. And I can't live without it.
Awesome. And Per, want to finish us off with this first question?
Yeah, I'm thinking of my viewfinder actually, and I carried my old Mark V viewfinder forever until it got a little outdated by Artemis and the phone that you use too much anyway. So I switched from my Mark V to the iPhone not that long ago, and I still carry my Mark V because it's almost like a pacifier for me. I really
Yeah.
like it. And that one comes out all the time, like on every scout, on every shoot, all the time. It's like, I guess I don't need it really because I would know what it would be, but it's something with actually, if you don't want to carry your camera on, you can just frame it up with something. It's a nice feeling and a nice tool.
Very cool. Well, that's a great start. We have a good sense of maybe everybody's kind of arsenal and what we're working with here as we talk about horror production. But Dominique, I want to go to you for the first specific question, which is, yeah, so you've worked across a good variety of genres and mediums, TV series, films, etc. And Him is this very high concept kind of horror thriller. I know you've worked maybe in that space in the past, but could you just talk to us a little bit about how your approach might change for a project like Him as opposed to something that's maybe a bit more grounded in a different genre like drama or comedy?
Yeah. Him is really like the dream project that like I've always wanted to do. Like ever since I've been doing, when I graduated, I started doing editorial fashion. And, there you have so much freedom to do very avant-garde things. And once I got into film and TV, I didn't have as much of that freedom. So him allowed me to really delve back into that. And I think just in terms of adjustment, it's just knowing your project, I mean, every creative has so many different sides of them and, such a wealth of knowledge in different arenas. So, um, for me, it was just like I was in heaven. Like I got to really use all those designers that were very bizarre and uh, use just incredible like looks that were just strange, honestly.
Totally. I'm curious, is there a specific look in the film where you felt like you were able to like especially exercise some of that creative freedom? And as a football fan myself, this film to me was like such a vision, such like a wild kind of sprawling execution of like a more fantastical vision of the sport. So I'm curious if there was one that jumped out to you in your designs.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I grew up with three brothers, so it was a football household, and you know, football jerseys are beautiful, but they don't have, you know, rose gold and ox blood in them, and so being able to have that freedom and to be able to also incorporate like these mascots that were just so bizarre and in many ways haunting. Um, that was my happy place. I got to really like get down in that area. So
Yeah. Well, very cool. So, one of the themes I want to definitely keep touching on with everybody here, because I think something that all your films have in common is everyone's kind of participating in something of like an established tradition or legacy, while also being allowed to build upon and reinterpret that in interesting ways. And so, Para, I want to go to you with that question because we record this as Black Phone 2 is in theaters right now. It's been this great success, this huge hit, and the first one was a hit as well. So you are stepping onto the sequel that has an established visual legacy. So I'm curious what the conversations were like as far as maybe inheriting some of those specific references, and then where were you also maybe given the license to kind of exercise some creative freedom and reinterpret what was established previously?
We had, or I had a, a lot of freedom, even though we went into pretty deep discussions about references and also referencing the first movie, obviously, since it was a success and we wanted to keep building on that, and we wanted to somewhat um, keep some sort of familiarity to it. At the same time, this script is very different from the first script, and what I had as a good there was I mean we returned to certain locations. We were in the basement, we were in their house, we had certain references just within the concept, and also the cast was the same, so we didn't have to be too worried about people not knowing in what universe they were. So that visually there was a little bit of freedom, and also, like I said, the concept was very different. A third of the movie is film, a third of the movie is Super 8. So I think the combination of having the discussions beforehand, having the references of the old movie, and at the same time trying to create something visually new was a theme very early for us in pre-production. And I think we got there. I think it looks different in a good way, and I also think it still reminds you of the original movie with all the elements that was carried over.
Bella, I want to go to you as our fellow cinematographer, and obviously you shot Alien Earth, the new TV series that it's the first TV adaptation of what has got to be one of the most iconic franchises in history, really. And so I'm
Yeah.
really just curious your perspective on this conversation, arriving at something that has all kinds of genre and visual expectations, but it's also been experimented with a lot over the years on the film side of things. Yeah, just talk to us a lot about what it was like for you to come in and sort of participate in an established tradition while also looking to advance that in a new direction with Alien Earth.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Alien, the first movie is like in my top three favorite movies of all time. It has been, and I remember, yeah, and I remember it's probably one of the best movies ever made. I remember like the first time I saw the film print, and I was just blown away. I just the and what also I love about the movie and the show is it also doesn't take itself too seriously. So it's like you're making this story about larger than life things, but also it's very grounded. But also, it kind of allows you to have fun with it and be entertained. So I think when it came to the show, it's like we want to do all of those things. We want to make it feel like you're watching the movie for the first time. And I think we had like a great experience where there's like a whole generation of people that weren't exposed to Alien. I think Romulus did a really great job at introducing a new generation, but for us, it was wanting to take visually all of the things that are so great about the movie. And really, we did the first three movies are kind of our visual reference point. But then also, you know, from the mind of Noah Hawley. And so having done Fargo with him, it's like, taking the ideas of what is the visuals of like moral corruption feel like. And then we have seeing the world of Alien through the eyes of a child. So we got to like kind of play a little bit with how we use the visuals, but I think basically it was just taking the atmosphere and the tone and just like the wetness that you feel when you watch Alien and just try and make that come through with our show, and then also like looking at that like you're a kid. And for me, seeing the movie as a kid for the first time when, so long ago, I can imagine watching those scenes again. Like I can imagine seeing the chest burster for the first time. And so every conversation in my mind and with directors is like, well, what does this look like in our world, but also what does it look like to a child? So really it's just like taking the world and looking from a different perspective maybe, but we 100% tried to stay true to like the classic storytelling and the visual homages that live in Alien, because why would you not? It's just such a great world to get to play in.
I'm curious if you could maybe, go even a little deeper there on
Mm-hmm.
the last episode of the series, The Real Monsters,
Yeah.
because that episode I think really embodies a lot of what you're talking about. And you talked about having worked with Noah previously on Fargo, and
Mm-hmm.
Noah Hawley is this guy who's, built really a reputation off of kind of like interrogating genre and established, franchise norms, if you will. So just
Yeah.
talk to us about how that kind of manifested itself in that last episode, The Real Monsters.
I think the last episode is just like the culmination of all of the craziness of this first season. You're seeing power dynamic switches, which is a big thing for Noah. We invest a lot in character development in Noah shows. Like every character's so fleshed out and has their own wants and needs and bias and all of these things. And so I feel like that last episode was a culmination of everyone's journey on the season and getting to where you've gotten, especially like Wendy and her taking her power. And not to like spoil anything, but obviously there's a lot to do with the creatures and how they interact with our children. Um, but also, I think visually, we like to do these like we call the second to last episode the penultimate episode, and then you have the finale. We want them to feel like this big crescendo of visuals and storytelling and entertainment. Honestly, you know what I mean. So for me, I think we got to kind of go off path a little bit. I think like Kirsch and Morrow fight. They have this big fight. It's like one of my favorite things. Um, and that's just, I think, what for me, what Noah did for the show, which is like we're in the world of Alien, but we get to see all these dynamics with people and how they progress throughout a season of television. and how our creatures progress and how scary they are going to become, and what might happen in season 2. And I think for our show it's so much creature heavy, because the creatures are also symbolism for a larger than life story that we're trying to tell in terms of like power, control, relationships. And so everything is just so thought out. And I think that Noah is like the perfect person to make a show like this, to take care of the IP, but also to put his own spin on it so that we can kind of see it in a new way, delve a little deeper.
Yeah,
Such
totally.
an
And I'm gonna,
amazing, sorry, I didn't mean to
oh, go ahead,
interrupt,
Per,
but
please.
such an amazing concept to dive into, the whole alien concept. I'm so jealous. That must have been so much fun.
So
It
much
must have
fun.
been
The most
so much
fun.
fun.
The
And
most
just
fun I've ever had.
watching the first 3 movies and pulling references out of that, it's like, yeah,
Yeah. To get
go
to
girl.
like have a shot at doing one of those sequences is being a part of film history. That's
It's
what it
so
feels like for
amazing.
me, you know? And so I feel so grateful, and I like a kid in a candy store every time I get to do that and then get to watch it again is like a very full circle experience for sure.
Yeah. What's next up? Godfather in a TV show? Or Apocalypse Now?
I'm hoping for a season 2. That's what I want. I'm ready to go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get
Well,
that.
you identify something there, Per, that is really, I think, awesome is that we're in this state with pop culture and media now that TV can be that level of cinematic. Like, that alien does feel right at home on TV and can look as gorgeous as your work does, Bella. Like, that's
Thank you.
super impressive. And we're
Yeah,
just
it's
so
quite
fortunate as consumers to be
it's
here, you know?
it's quite amazing actually. I mean, what a trip to do TV series with Alien. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and
Mm.
also you're really lucky that you can bring something new to it while also paying homage to the source material.
Absolutely.
Not a lot of people get a chance to do that, so yeah, you're very lucky.
Yeah, those creatures. I mean, that for me is like the best part is that you get to experience new creatures and be a
Mm-hmm.
part of establishing that language. Like I was the
Mm-hmm.
first person to shoot this orchid, and I've shot most of the orchid stuff, and like just to be, I don't know, a part of that journey where you're gonna show a new creature that's probably gonna terrorize Earth. Is like a really like giddy experience, and also to get to work with all the craftsmen that make all these beautiful, like some of them are puppets and some of them are like full robotics, but getting to work with so many talented people who all get to put their vision in is like an unbelievably beautiful thing to experience and be a part of.
Totally. And Doug, I just want to go over to you really quick because I think the compliment that you just gave, I've asked everybody sort of some version of this question, and it's even true for The Long Walk that, this is a film that obviously is inspired by, a Stephen King novel, so there's that sense of the source material. But even I think now as film fans, we all have a sense of what a Stephen King adaptation even kind of is or what that looks like, right? And so in a sense, The Long Walk is also participating in a tradition like that as well. So I'm curious for you, like, what was maybe your relationship with Stephen King adaptations prior, your relationship with the Long Walk as a novel, and yeah, just kind of how that all manifested itself in your creative work on the film.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a Stephen King fan since I can remember. When the first thing I saw as a kid was Salem's Lot on TV, which terrified the crap out of me. I think I was 12 or 13 when I was scared, and just terrified me, but couldn't look away and wanted to know who Stephen King was. So yeah, it's really amazing to be able to be part of the Stephen King world. There's no doubt about that. And also to be a part of, like, this is the first book he ever wrote when he was 19. And it's kind of his kind of take on the Vietnam War. So we used a lot of that kind of reference, but uh, pulled from some, Vietnam War type movies to get some inspiration from. But to be a part of the Stephen King world is, yeah, it's an honor.
Yeah. And so I wasn't aware of the Vietnam parallels, but I absolutely hear that, and I see that now. Like I feel like the film's overall color palette definitely evokes a lot of films, either of that era or that just dealt with Vietnam more recently. So that's super interesting. And I've another follow up for you, Doug, as well, which is so this is it's called The Long Walk. This film is essentially one very long walk. It's kind of just one long sequence. But I'm sure for you as the makeup department head, that presents a lot of key challenges in terms of continuity, keeping in mind things like sweat, fatigue, the different injuries that are quite gruesome in this film that evolve over the course of the film. So how do you in your team sort of plan and execute those progressive changes from a makeup standpoint over the course of these extended takes or different sequences?
Well, we were really, really, really lucky working with Francis Lawrence, because we shot the whole movie in continuity order, which, as we all know, never happens. So and that was done mainly for the cast, because it was such an emotional journey. But it was also for costume, hair, makeup, because they have this great, breakdown and change from the beginning to the end. So we sat down with Francis and figured out, for makeup we had 8 different stages. We figured out where each stage would end and begin. And then it was the other great thing was we probably had 4 or 5 weeks of regular prep, but we were given the opportunity to test every single walker, um, put each of them through as many stages as we could. I think we had about 2 weeks to do that, which again usually never happens. So we could really plan out exactly what the stages would look like, and Francis could see and give his input, obviously. Um, so that was great. So when we day one, everyone knew what to expect. There was no surprises, and as well, it was not just my department, but working with costume, for example, and figuring out what they were going to do and how much sweat they were going to have, maybe, or for each stage or whatnot. So it was a real coordinated effort, um, and it that whole thing just made the whole process way less stressful once we got into shooting. As we all know, things can pop up, and the worst thing you can do is go into a project not feeling 100% secure in what is expected of you, and that wasn't the case on this project. So it was one of the best experiences of my career.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, definitely did not realize that it was all shot sequentially. That's super cool, and I think
Yeah,
is really like you feel that in hindsight. Like I feel like that really contributes to the overall tone of the project and the way that the emotional evolution of it kind of takes place. So it's very cool, and it's such a cinematic and like visceral experience. And what like I said, this movie's one long walk. That doesn't have to necessarily be super cinematic and visceral, right? So I think it's really a testament to
yeah,
your work and that of your collaborators that it came out the way that it did. Um, so, we've talked a lot here about like tradition, right? And like, the genre expectations and norms. But I do want to kind of get everybody's thoughts on this. Maybe I'll start with you, Dominique. So you talked about how like you had such creative freedom with him and how it really did feel like a dream project in that sense. But how do you sort of find inspiration, especially new inspiration and innovate these new ideas within a genre like horror that is so kind of bound by expectation and what has come before. So in the case of him, a football horror film I know was very novel to people and was a large part of the appeal of this project. So like yeah, what you could talk a little bit more about this idea of inspiration, and how you're able to kind of both embrace and go against some of these expectations we keep talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. At this point, I've done 3 different football projects, and I hope I'm not being pigeonholed as a football costume designer or
okay,
sports girl. But I did Colin Kaepernick, Colin in black and white, and then I just did Chad Powers, which is college football. But him was NFL. It was the top of the top. And so I think in terms of inspiration, I drew mostly from, these kind of futuristic um, pieces of equipment that are not accessible to everyone. So I did a lot of research about, what kind of gear, protective gear, training gear, stuff like that, that's like only the top of the top athletes use. And then I really worked to try to incorporate that in, but almost exaggerate it and take it to the next level. Um, when it comes to their weighted vests in the scene where they're like running in the desert, it looks as though they're where it feels as though they have scales, and they're very like just in beast mode. Um, but I think more than anything, it was the face masks for their helmets. I wanted them to be able to see through as a goat, right? They were the goat. So we had these face masks custom made in Berlin by an amazing artist that, had the eyes, everything of the goat face, and then we had the whole thing cast in rose gold. And that masked with the rose gold visor, you know, the guys would just say, like, even BG, when they would put the helmets on, it was like they were locked into another universe. And for me, that's the dream. Like, I, I take inspiration from just, intention. Like, what is their mission? What is their goal, right? Their goal is to be the GOAT. So, how can they suit up and show up in that way? Um, and then it's head to toe. So, then we did rose gold cleats, and, we worked with Rich Paul's company, Clutch Athletics, to like get like the flyest gear ever. But, we can talk about this later, but the mascots were really my piece de resistance. I love I really love the work that we were able to do on the mascots.
Well, please, if you want to tell us a little about the mascots, we're happy to. I'd love to hear it. We can do that now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, with mascots, there's so much attached to them, historically. Um, people have, different leagues have used mascots from whatever region they're from, and kind of, in a way, it's a culture vulture type situation where they just pick up what's there and they make it a funny cartoon version of it. But we tried to reclaim that notion and brought in actual fine artists that are indigenous, and allowed them the space to have, just a voice to rework what, they've seen in the past, and make a statement. So we really wanted to show that progression. So we had 3 different mascots, and it traveled from the conquistador Larry, who's just all about gluttony, greed, and wealth, and taking land, into Tinsel Larry, which is the razzle dazzle all American cowboy, you know. And then we finally peaked at the most authentic that we felt, which was Lone Star Larry, which he's the GOAT. So he was this abstract, kind of bizarre creature that, he had 2 eyes, but he you couldn't really connect with him emotionally. He was just very physical and off-putting to a certain degree. And so I liked that haunting element of mascots, because usually mascots are so chipper. But being able to show how that progression of, you know, being politically incorrect, and showing a league that's trying to work towards being something that's acceptable, but never not actually getting there, not being bold enough to actually fully get there. And so then we allowed the three mascots to live simultaneously together. And that showed like the true history of like, you know, they can't even let go of this past, this dirty past. So yeah,
Very
I'm
cool.
I'm very proud of the mascots.
Yeah, it's awesome, and it's really cool to hear that you're able to bring in some of those indigenous artists you talked about, especially because, in the context of the film, I think we're meant to feel a little off-put or like uncomfortable with the way that a lot of this indigenous art has been kind of incorporated into these players' lives, and so to like reflect that in your own artistry is really really cool, I think, and yeah, just again a testament to like the kind of level of detail on this project. So that's very very
Yeah.
cool.
Big shout out to Chanupa and Spencer Hansen. They're two of the main artists we worked with to make that
Awesome.
happen. So
Yeah, and you said something there as well, Dominique, that Doug, I kind of maybe want your thoughts on. And I know I posed this initial question around like inspiration, but there's the other side of inspiration. Like I thought Dominique said something interesting when she noted how, her own the actors felt inspired putting on some of these costumes, and I'm sure, as a makeup artist, that's happened to you before as well, or that's something you're often thinking about, is the ways in which your designs can enhance performance and kind of even motivate performance in a certain way. Does anything come to mind as it relates to the long walk when you think about some of your different designs on that project and how it related to performance?
Yeah. I mean, not every actor likes to get makeup, even just, because I do, beauty makeup and all that as well. Not every actor, especially guys, like to even get a little foundation on. And Cooper Hoffman is one of those people. And I mean, lovely, lovely guy. Don't get me wrong. Um, and it was something we discussed, at the beginning of the show. But he said in an interview that this was a project where he knew he had to look a certain way. He had to look bad, and he had to look, healthy to terrible by the end of the movie. And he just kind of gave himself to me and let me do what I needed to do, which was uh, by the end quite a bit, because there were little prosthetic eye bags and lips, and they were heavily, heavily painted to make them look, um, haggard and drawn and grimy and sweaty. And uh, so I just really appreciate the fact that someone who really doesn't want anything would let himself, uh, uh, you know, use what we have, costume, hair, makeup, to help create the character. And it's always a real collaboration. Uh, again, not only with the cast, but with costume and hair and props, and um, uh, so it was again, it was just a great experience in terms of that. Just you know, most of the guys, I think they all really enjoyed it, because they would look at themselves by the end of the shoot, and they just look like shit. And I think they kind of liked it. And for me, I mean, it was a real joy to be able to make them look terrible, hopefully in a really realistic way, and have it kind of translate and help their performance. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm curious, from our two cinematographers as well, you're obviously also just as responsible for how these performers look, in the final frame. So maybe Perry, I could go over to you. Having also worked with some really talented young actors on Black Phone 2. Just tell us about maybe a little more about that collaboration, and how you work with performers to just kind of set up the most impressive imagery possible.
Yeah, so I guess we're tapping back into the reference world again, like glancing at other horror movies to see, it's like what sort of world are we in when it comes to inspiration, and and I tend to try and widen that inspiration scope a little bit to not only watch a certain genre, to sort of tap into things that I like, no matter where they come from, and see if I can use any elements of that. When it came to the collaboration, like you said, with the young actors, that was in this case just a complete joy. They were so amazing, these guys, and so inspiring to work with, and so extremely professional, like to a degree where you like blown away. It's like young people being this professional, this prepared, and this locked in. That was one of the biggest joys with this project, to be honest. They were like fantastic, all of them.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember being so impressed with a lot of those young performers in the first film, and it's great to see that obviously that continue with the second as well. For this question, Bella, I'm curious if anything comes to mind. We're having kind of these dual conversations around, both maybe providing inspiration via your craft, but also like taking it in the ways in which we kind of build beyond those. I'm curious, yeah, if anything has come to mind over the course of this conversation.
You know, I like really try and get as prepared as I can before I shoot a scene in terms of like lighting. Like, and I think luckily on this show, it was a lot of like rigging and stuff like that. So I had most of my things ready, but I really like draw a lot of my inspiration from a blocking rehearsal. Like, once I see what the actors are really doing and where they're going, I feel like is how like how I start to think about what the mood and tone is in terms of lighting. And then also it affects every decision in terms of like, are they allowing us to be with them? Are we not allowed to be with them? Are we more of a voyeur? So like if we are with them, are we on a wider lens and are we closer to them and are we really inside their head? Or are we not really allowed to see this moment and we're on a long lens and maybe there's some foreground and you know, but I think all of those things for me come from the way that our actors are portraying the scene. Like I can have my base ideas before, but until I really see how it plays out and what they're giving, I don't fully know. But once I do see that, it's like my brain already knows what to do. Like I don't really have a choice. It just kind of tells me, and I think I love that because I feel like my work will never be the same because I'm not working with the same people over and over again. And also, I just feel like it on a show like this, I'm so lucky that I get to work with so many amazing actors that, I feel privileged that they're allowing me to draw that influence from them and therefore we're working together. Like, I always think the camera and the actors are a dance. The camera operator is really like your partner in that, and they're really being there for you and watching the frame and making sure you're safe and good and anything you need. And so I think that in that way, I've really in the last few years drawn a lot of like my creative source and everything from the actors. And that's new for me, but I'm really enjoying it and really grateful that like I get to have that experience with people on every job I do.
I love what
I
you're saying,
totally
Bella.
agree to piggyback. Like watching the blocking informs everything, and it just takes me back to like when I used to do a lot of theater, like every movement is dictated by like an action,
Mm-hmm.
a desire, And so when you see the actors, working it out, even in terms of, for me, it's a lot of times practice. Like it makes you shift your whole perspective and like
Yeah,
often make like aggressive changes, but it's all to service the story. So
absolutely.
love hearing that, Bella.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, Bella, and I think it sort of echoes a little bit what I try to think about in every project. It's like how important it is to be open to. It's almost like you need to be 100% prepared and know what you're doing, and you have the plan, everything is sorted out, but at the same time you need to have that door open because you will see stuff that
Yeah,
sort of develops during the course of the shoot, and also like in all sorts of ways really, but as you say, especially maybe with the actors, that they they start to give you things that you couldn't possibly foresee. um,
absolutely.
and I think it sort of describes a little bit the best kind of movies, at least the the ones I think is the best movies, you have a feeling it's its own creature almost. Like the that movie that you really love and that really talks to you has its own life, and it was indeed created by talented people, but it turned into something that lives by itself. I just think that's the best type of movies you can see, where you can understand how they were struggling when they did it, but that was part of like what it turned into.
Absolutely.
But that's the great thing too about it's not just the actors that are giving the intention of their characters. It's definitely, and not a lot of people realize this, how important the cinematography is to the movie and to really specific scenes to give the intention of the character or their roles or their authority over another character, and it's all subliminal. But when you are watching it and kind of understand, uh, the cinematography is just so vital to the storytelling. Yeah, always fascinating.
Totally. I appreciate all of your insights there because I feel like we spent a lot of this conversation, talking about some of the most heightened elements of projects, the aliens, the mascots, the sweat and the blood. But like I think you all articulated really well there, all the different things that can ultimately make a great film, which is what grounds it, and so as we come to a close here, I'm curious, this for recording this, it's in October, it's spooky season. We're obviously all fans of horror here. If we could just take a quick go around the table, maybe, and everyone kind of share something that they're excited to watch this month, whether it's a film, a TV show, or something else entirely. What's maybe a spooky piece of media that you're excited to consume this October? I'll start with you, Per.
I have so many horror movies that I need to catch up on. I can't even start. But I also want to see House of Dynamite. Catherine Bigelow's new movie. I'm really
Yeah.
excited about that one. I want to see that one. But and then a handful of horror movies that I want to catch up on. I can't do it with my family. I have to do it on my own. Nobody wants to see the horror movies, so I run out of time all the time.
I just caught House of Dynamite in theaters. I believe it was last weekend, and that's a horror movie in its own right. So I
Yeah, that's
definitely,
what I thought.
yeah, definitely recommend that one. Dominique, I'm curious, what's up with you?
Yeah. Skeleton Key is an oldie, but like a goodie. Like it kind of swept under the radar to a certain degree, but like I just love the historical ties to that and like how I don't know, just like the infiltration of like slavery and like re-inhabiting bodies and generational curses. Like that movie always makes me think. Um, but then there's also like just the cult classics like Sleepaway Camp 3, which I'm like here for that too. Like just fun, good time slasher film. So yeah.
Totally. The Skeleton Key is a great choice, and I think it's a good example of a kind of like a precedent for a lot of what Monkey Paw Productions is doing now with a film like him, and obviously Jordan Peele's own directorial efforts, like this kind of like social horror, or this horror that has a little bit more on its mind, maybe than some other recent entries. So that's a great call and definitely a good recommendation for people to check out. Bella, do you have one that comes to mind?
Um, I do. I met Pear like last month, and we were talking about Black Phone 2, and we've been texting in between, and I've been like, I cannot wait to see this movie. So for me, it's that. But now I'm like, well, I want to watch everyone's projects that are on here, obviously, because now I've heard them talk about them in such detail and how
Yeah, me too.
like the intention behind them. That so now my list is long, and I'm very excited for everything.
Yeah. As someone who has too much time on his hands and is nerdy enough to have consumed all of your projects, I do truly recommend all of them. There's truly something to be found in all of them. Really, really awesome stuff we got here. Doug, I'm curious if you could close this out with a recommendation or two.
Yeah, first I'm gonna watch all of your projects, definitely. Um,
Me too.
I mean, I'm an old guy. I got into this before Star Wars and all that. So my big influences were the old Universal monster movies. and obviously I love horror and all that. So I started my Halloween watching like 2 weeks ago. So the original Frankenstein, the original Dracula. Yesterday I watched The Curse of Frankenstein, the Hammer, the Hammer versions of the Universal monsters. So that's what I'm gonna do. I love Halloween, and I'm just gonna close out with this. When I was 9, I came home from trick or treating, and my dad said he was great. He'd let me watch anything. He said, "Come here, we're gonna watch this movie," and it was Nosferatu, like the 1922 version.
Amazing.
And I was 9, and it terrified the crap out of me. And it was, a black and white silent movie. And my mom was so mad at my dad because I couldn't sleep with the light off in the bedroom. And that's what's great about movies is they give you this great emotion and great feeling of stuff that you keep wanting to come back to. So yeah, I mean, I've got a ton of movies over here that I just watch all the time.
Yeah.
But yes, that's what I'm going to continue doing until. Well, I'm just going to do it all the time because
As you
um,
should. That'd be
I don't
It's
awesome.
just
ama-
wait for how my life.
it's
Yeah.
it's amazing with those movies that stays with you for a very long time. Then
Mhm.
and when you get to revisit them once in a, like an old friend. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had the similar experience with my dad. We were out sailing, and we got sort of stuck in a small town harbor. We couldn't get out because the weather was too bad. And he's like, "Why don't we go to the movies?" I was like, "Oh, you bet." And I was maybe, I don't know, but I was young, very young. And he took me to Deliverance without knowing what sort of movie it was.
Oh my God.
And you can imagine, like, he was staring at me and I was staring at the screen completely as like the best movie I've ever saw. And I don't know, I totally got it even though I was so small, but I remember he was terrified. And it's like, you cannot tell your mother what we saw. I was like, okay, whatever.
Well,
Oh,
shout out
that's
to
awesome.
our irresponsible parents for inspiring us and getting us
Yeah,
where we are all
It
yeah.
today.
sounds like the beginning of a movie. You get stuck in a small town from your boat.
It does. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There could be like a spin-off of that actual situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next
I,
year's horror hit.
There's definitely
yeah.
something there for
There's a
sure.
movie in there somewhere for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I can't think of a better way to end it than that. A real life spooky story. And yeah, just great recommendations from all movies filled with great imagery. Like I think Doug, you put it well. Like you talk about Nosferatu. That's a silent film that can still stick with you just because its imagery is so haunting and harrowing. And I think there's very similar visuals to be found in all of the products we've been discussing today. So that's all the time we have. I really appreciate all of you guys' time. It's been a really, really fun conversation. I just want to thank you to our panelists, Bella, Per, Dominique, and Doug. Thank you for being with us today to discuss all of your incredible work. And thank you to Impact 24 PR for putting this panel together. And to everybody for watching as well. We'll see everybody soon. Thanks again.